What makes Higurashi so special, beyond the violence, horror, and complex time-looping mechanics, is the characters and their relationships to one another. No matter how twisted the story becomes, at its core, it's the bonds between these friendships that give the series its foundation. Through all the bloodshed, paranoia, and madness, what binds these characters together is a deep and genuine care for one another. It's easy to get lost in the show's layers of mystery and terror, but it's the moments of warmth between the friends that remind us what's really at stake. Rika, Satoko, Keiichi, Rena, Mion. They're more than just victims caught in a cruel loop. They're a family, in a sense, each of them willing to fight and die for one another, over and over again. This bond is what keeps Rika going, what helps her endure the endless suffering of each reset. Despite the unimaginable horrors they face, the characters' shared love and friendship offer a glimmer of hope in the darkest moments. Higurashi SOTSU relives the brutal events of Go, but this time from the viewpoint of the antagonists, primarily Satoko, the mastermind of these twisted cycles. The brilliance of this approach is how it recontextualizes everything we thought we knew. The audience already has an understanding of the major events, the descent into madness, the violent outbreaks, and the horrific deaths. But now, instead of experiencing it through the eyes of the victims, we see how Satoko has been pulling the strings from the shadows. The start of Season 2 takes a moment to slow down and delve into the heart of one of the characters who, up until now, seemed like a bright, friendly face amongst the cast. Rena. What makes this opening so special is how it shifts focus, revealing the deep emotional layers of Rena's character that have been hidden beneath her ever-present smile. We begin to understand that beneath the lighthearted exterior, Rena carries an immense amount of pain, especially from the brokenness of her family life. We learn that Rena's parents separated in one of the most devastating ways imaginable. Her mother didn't just leave her father, she left him for another man, one she thought would offer a better life. This betrayal deeply scarred Rena, who was caught in the crossfire of her parents' collapsing marriage. Her father, devastated and unable to cope, spiraled downward. What's worse is that even in her mother's new life, Rena is left to pick up the pieces, living with the knowledge that she was essentially discarded along with her father. But the emotional weight of Rena's story doesn't end there. Her father, unable to move on from the heartbreak, clings to the barest threads of existence. He survives, but only barely, through a fake relationship with a woman from a club. He doesn't love her, and she doesn't love him. But it's the illusion of companionship that keeps him from completely collapsing. For Rena, seeing her father live this hollow life is agonizing. She watches him drag himself through the motions, a shell of the man he once was, and it breaks her heart. Despite all of this, Rena continues to put on a brave face. She goes through her days with a smile, participating in the games with her friends, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy, but the cracks are there, just beneath the surface. We start to see the quiet moments of vulnerability when she's alone, the weight of her pain crashing down when no one's watching. The cheerful facade that Rena projects begins to feel more like a mask, one she wears to protect herself from the crushing reality of her broken family life. And then, just as we're beginning to fully understand the depth of Rena's struggles, something terrible happens. Satoko injects Rena with the Hinamizawa virus. This moment marks the true beginning of the end for Rena. The virus, which we've seen unleash madness and paranoia in its victims before, now takes hold of Rena, and her fragile emotional state only magnifies its effects. The virus feeds on her internal pain, amplifying her insecurities and the anger she's repressed for so long. Rena is now at the mercy of a force that drags all of that pain to the surface in the most violent and destructive way possible. What makes this so devastating is that we've come to truly empathize with Rena. We see her as more than just the happy, energetic girl she's always been presented as. We understand her struggle, her loneliness, and her desire to protect her father, even as she feels powerless to change anything. And then Satoka's manipulation through the virus exploits that vulnerability, twisting Rena's pain into something monstrous. Rena's descent into madness reaches a point of no return when she takes the horrifying step of murdering the woman her father was involved with. Driven by a twisted hope that eliminating this woman would somehow restore her fractured family, Rena lures her away under false pretenses, and in an act of cold-blooded violence, kills her. The moment is chilling, not just because of the brutality of the act, but because Rena truly believes that this will fix everything. But what makes this even more tragic is what comes next. After the murder, Rena disassembles the woman's body, burying the parts in separate locations around the village. It's a grotesque and desperate attempt to cover her tracks, to somehow erase what she's done. In her broken mind, she convinces herself that if she can just hide this sin, if she can make it disappear, then maybe her life can return to normal. Maybe her father will come back to her, and they can be a family again. Of course, this is a delusion, and it's painfully clear that Rena's mind is no longer her own. The paranoia fueled by the virus begins to consume her. She starts seeing threats everywhere, especially from those closest to her. In her distorted view of the world, everyone around her becomes a potential enemy, a conspirator, who will reveal her secret and take away what little control she has left. Keiichi becomes the target of her growing mistrust. It's really hard to watch, especially because Keiichi sees that something is wrong. He knows Rena is suffering, and in a moment of vulnerability, he pours his heart out to her, trying to reach the girl he once knew. He tells her how much he cares about her, how he wants to help, and for a fleeting second, you hope that maybe this will get through to her, but Rena's consumed by the paranoia and the madness that the virus has unleashed. She no longer understands Keiichi's feelings. She can't see the love and concern behind his words. Instead, she only sees betrayal. In the most heartbreaking moment of this arc, Rena has lost herself to madness, and so she turns on Keiichi. Despite everything he's done for her, she sees him as another threat. She's beyond reason, and with the paranoia blinding her completely, she attempts to murder him. The scene is brutal, especially when coupled with the knowledge that Keiichi truly cares for her. It's a devastating reminder of how far Rena has fallen, how the girl who once smiled and laughed with her friends is now a shell of her former self, driven to kill those she loves, because she can no longer trust anyone. The grand irony is that Keiichi's words might have saved her had they come sooner, before the virus, but by this point, it's too late. Rena's mind is too far gone, and the warmth of Keiichi's affection is lost in the haze of her insanity. Her attempt to kill him is not born from malice, but from a deep, uncontrollable fear. A fear that the world has turned against her, and that Keiichi, just like everyone else, is a part of the conspiracy she imagines in her fractured psyche. In the second arc, we get to see a side of Mion that has been hinted at but never fully explored until now, her feelings for Keiichi. It all starts with a seemingly innocent gesture. Keiichi gives Mion a doll, an act that might seem small, but it sparks something inside of her. Mion, who's always been a bit of a tomboy and more guarded with her emotions, begins to see Keiichi in a romantic light. This arc captures Mion's vulnerability as her affection for Keiichi grows, and she starts acting more feminine, perhaps for the first time in a long time. Their relationship begins to develop more over time. Keiichi and Mion see each other more often, and you can feel Mion's internal struggle as she grapples with her blossoming feelings. It's touching and bittersweet to watch her navigate this newfound sense of romance, but there's always an underlying tension, something foreboding about where this could be headed. Mion, the one who's always been in control, now feels herself losing grip as her feelings for Keiichi intensify. Just as we start to see a softer side of Mion, things take a dark turn. Mion's world begins to unravel when she sees Keiichi with Shion. While Keiichi is oblivious to the romantic tension between the twins, for Mion, this is devastating. The jealousy that starts to eat away at her is overwhelming. She's already been injected with the Hinamizawa virus by this point, and the combination of the virus and her emotional turmoil becomes too much to handle. The virus takes over her psyche, amplifying her jealousy and twisting it into something far darker. What started as a simple sibling rivalry becomes a toxic, destructive force. Mion's anger toward Shion grows more intense with every passing day, and soon it spirals out of control. The virus taps into Mion's insecurities and her protective instincts toward Keiichi, warping them until she can no longer think rationally. In a fit of rage, Mion snaps. She strangles her twin sister, driven by jealousy, anger, and an overwhelming need to keep Keiichi to herself. It's one of the most gut-wrenching moments in this arc and the series. We watch Mion, who has always loved her twin sister, kill her in such a brutal way. Immediately after the fact, Mion is hit with the horrifying realization of what she's done. She cries out in grief and despair, but it's too late. The damage is irreversible, and we're left to witness the heartbreaking sight of Mion devastated by her own actions, crying over her sister's lifeless body. It's truly painful to see Mion, who's usually the group's protector, lose control so completely. The tragedy of Mion's story lies in the fact that she's always been the one to keep everyone safe, but now, under the influence of the virus, she becomes the one who destroys everything she loves. The climax of the arc comes when Mion invites Keiichi over to her residence. At first, things seem somewhat normal, though there's an underlying tension. They talk, and Mion almost seems like her old self again, but we know that something is wrong. As they talk, it becomes clear that Mion's mind is fractured. Her desire to protect Keiichi has made her do horrible things. She locks him in a basement, convinced that this is the only way to keep him safe from the dangers she believes are all around them. And then, what follows is violence. Mion has already killed her sister, but her descent doesn't stop there. She kills her grandmother, Rika, and is about to kill Satoko as well. The bodies pile up, and it's all the more tragic because Mion believes that she's doing the right thing. She's convinced that this violence is necessary to protect Keiichi and their future. Her feelings, which might have led to something beautiful, instead lead to destruction and death. And in the end, Mion is left alone, her hands stained in blood, and she dies alone. In the third arc, Satoko isn't the innocent abused child that the audience was led to believe in the first season. The shocking twist comes when we find out that Satoko has been orchestrating everything. Her uncle, who once seemed like the source of her torment, is actually a kind and caring man. He's someone who genuinely tries to support her, despite being caught up in the web of lies Satoko spins. Satoko's manipulation serves a dark purpose. By making it appear that she's been abused, she not only gains the sympathy and protection of the entire village, but she also diverts suspicion from herself. It's a cruel game, and her uncle, who genuinely believes he's failing her, becomes a sympathetic figure in this arc. He's racked with guilt, thinking the entire village is bullying Satoko, and he feels powerless to help her. The scenes where he tries to comfort Satoko are some of the most heartbreaking, as his sincere attempts to support her are met with cold calculation. Satoko's manipulation is so complete that she has convinced him he's part of the problem, and the despair he feels is almost too much to bear. But Satoko's plans nearly unravel when Oishi, the village detective, begins to suspect something is off. In a tense moment, Satoko's carefully constructed lies almost fall apart under scrutiny. Sensing the threat, Satoko makes a drastic move. She injects Oishi with the Hinamizawa virus, ensuring that he becomes another puppet in her game. This act sets the stage for the horrific events that follow. As Oishi's descent into madness begins the unraveling of everything else in the village. Satoko's complexity reaches new heights in this arc. We see her orchestrate event after event, always one step ahead of everyone else. She's pulling the strings, setting up traps, and manipulating emotions. It's clear that she's using the village, Rika, and even her uncle as pawns in a larger scheme. One that she's refined through hundreds, if not thousands, of loops. Satoko has become a master puppeteer, and her nature makes her one of the most terrifying figures in this series. But then we learn something even more weird. Satoko has developed a split personality, a manifestation of the witch-like madness that has taken over her through her countless loops. While this does cheapen the significance of Satoko's free will and the choices that have led her down this path, it does offer a glimpse into the fractured state of her mind. Satoko isn't completely gone. There are moments where her original self fights to break through the madness. One of the most poignant scenes in this arc comes when Satoko, in a rare moment of clarity, tries to save her uncle. She fires at him, but when she sees the consequences of her actions, there's a brief struggle within her. The old Satoko resurfaces, horrified at what she's doing, and she tries to stop herself. But the witch part of her, the twisted personality born of the endless loops, takes control and ends her uncle's life. It's a brutal moment, but it shows that some part of Satoko is still aware of the horror she's unleashing. And then there's the climax of this arc. After killing her uncle, Satoko puts the final pieces of her plan into motion. She sneak attacks Keiichi, knocking him out just as he starts to suspect the truth. At the same time, she convinces Oishi that he can solve the curse of Hinamizawa. Now completely controlled by the virus, he goes to murder Rika, who he believes to be the perpetrator of these crimes. The final arc picks up right where the shocking reveal in Go left us. Rika's capture and the devastating realization that Satoko, her closest friend, has been the one pulling the strings behind the loops all along. This confrontation finally erupts into an all-out battle that spans multiple loops, different ages, and an array of environments. It's a thrilling back and forth that showcases just how deeply intertwined Rika and Satoko are as both best friends and worst enemies. As the battle unfolds, it becomes clear that this is no ordinary fight. With each loop, the stakes escalate. One moment they're in a forest, the next they're in the middle of a street or a schoolyard, using every tool at their disposal. Satoko and Rika are both fully aware of the loop mechanics and use them to their advantage, switching tactics and environments. Weapons appear, vanish, and change with each new reality, creating a dizzying but exhilarating rhythm to their conflict. The battle isn't a physical one. There's a psychological edge as each tries to wear the other down mentally. The best part of this sequence is that despite the high-energy action, the emotional weight of their friendship and their betrayal remains palpable. Eventually, the two end up on a rooftop, a fitting location for the climax of their battle. It's an intense back and forth as they trade blows. But what makes this fight so compelling isn't just the combat itself, but the history behind each strike. Every punch, every swing of a weapon carries the weight of their past. The years of friendship, the shared memories, and the bitterness of Satoko's resentment and Rika's desire for freedom. And then things get a little ridiculous. Rika pulls out the Onigari no Ryu fragment, a sacred blade to kill Satoko. The battle kind of changes at this point from something like a psychological horror battle to something a little bit more intense. When Rika wields the blade, she powers up, gaining a new uniform, and her speed and strength reach superhuman levels. She can now fly and move at super speed. The battle is exciting, but it's also really jarring, and makes it feel like a Naruto end battle sequence. But Satoko refuses to be outdone, and she pulls out her own nearly complete version of the sword. She knocks Rika away, sending her crashing through a field of garbage. Satoko also powers up, and her abilities match Rika's. The battle goes crazy hard, and it changes more into a superhero-themed battle than a deeply intimate psychological horror type of battle, which we've come to expect. While the high-powered, flashy combat feels a little over the top for my taste, it's undeniably fun to watch at moments. The visuals, the choreography, and the sheer spectacle of the battle are impressive, even if it's a little out of place. The turning point comes when Rika gains the upper hand and is ready to strike Satoko down once and for all. But at the last moment, she hesitates. Instead of finishing Satoko off with the sword, she throws it aside and begins punching her. It's a raw, emotional moment that brings the battle back to its core. This isn't just about winning or losing, it's about their friendship. In that moment, Rika makes it clear that she never wanted to fight Satoko in the first place. She doesn't want to kill her. Rika doesn't want to lose Satoko, but she also can't give up on her dream at the academy and the life she's fought so hard to achieve. Satoko, on the other hand, doesn't want to lose Rika, but she can't accept the idea of Rika leaving her behind for a new life. It's a great moment between two rivals who are still, at their core, best friends. The raw emotion of Rika's punches, each one filled with years of pain, frustration, and love, hits harder than the sword could. In this instant, we see that their battle has never been about hatred, but fear. Fear of losing each other, fear of change, fear of what their friendship has become. The arc ends on a bittersweet note, reminding us that even in the midst of such intense conflict, Rika and Satoko's bond is too strong to be broken by simple victory or defeat. Their friendship, twisted as it has become, still lies at the heart of their motivations. So, like I said before, this show is about friendship. That's what it's always been about. The beauty and the horrors of friendship. The strongest draw of this anime was its intense mystery. I loved not knowing what was going on, why characters sometimes just acted out of place for a moment. I loved the dark atmosphere and haunting, mesmerizing scenery. There's something about how the peaceful moments in Hinamizawa were always laced with this creeping dread. The show had a way of making even the most mundane scenes feel ominous, like something dark was lurking just around the corner. The music also perfectly captured the eerie, foreboding moments that foreshadowed the end of the good times. There was always that sinking feeling that things would take a turn for the worse. Every reset of the loop, every mysterious death, and every small moment of inexplicable madness had me glued to the screen, trying to piece it all together. Why did the world keep resetting? Why was there a different antagonist every time? What supernatural horror haunted this seemingly innocent village? I loved being kept in the dark, trying to unravel the mystery alongside the characters. It's not often that a show keeps me in suspense so effectively, and Higurashi lived up to every bit of the stakes it presented from the very beginning. The story was gripping from start to finish, constantly shifting the ground beneath me while managing to keep the characters' friendships at the center of all the chaos. Even in the darkest moments, the bonds between the characters were what made this story so human, so painful, and so unforgettable. But beyond the horror and mystery, what makes Higurashi truly magnificent is its narrative. This isn't just a horror show that aims to scare. It's a story that's carefully constructed, where every detail, character, and twist has a purpose. The narrative has a way of continuously pulling you into a deeper sense of mystery and dread with every loop. This is what makes it stand out. Every new revelation recontextualizes everything that came before it. And by the end, you're left marveling at how well everything fits together. Higurashi isn't just one of my favorite horror anime because of the scares or the atmosphere. It's because of the experience. It showed me what it means to write a thought-out, intricate story where even the most chaotic moments have a clear design behind them. It's an anime that respects its audience enough to let them stay confused or explore the horror and mystery on their own terms, and finally reward them with a satisfying conclusion. And this is why Higurashi is now one of my favorite horror stories of all time.